Hi guys, welcome back to another video, or your first video here, I don't know. Welcome if you're new here, welcome either way. So this video is going to be my fairly late August wrap up. I read quite a few books this month, really all across the rating scale. So let's start with the books I like the least and work up to the books I like the most. So I like to start with the books I DNF'd. So going on from a couple of my previous videos, I've been going through a lot of my comics, deciding what I do and don't want to read, and I decided to give this series a go, A Devil and Her Love Song. Now this got recommended to me a while ago, so I decided to pick it up, and I realised then that I honestly didn't know anything about this, so I decided to give it a try, and it's just not for me. This one felt like it was going to have a lot of really good messages, like not judging someone from, not even by their cover, but like from what other people say about them or rumours, etc. So this one has a new girl at school and she makes friends with these two boys. Anyway, I just figured that the characterization was a little bit flat and didn't feel that two-dimensional. People seem to be like, this person is a bully and they are nothing but that thing. This person is a sweet person and they are nothing but that thing. And I know that this sort of thing can take time, but I just wasn't interested enough to continue. So this is going on at the DNF pile. The next DNF I have is a play that I recently picked up, and that is 2 Weeks with the Queen, the play by Mary Morris from the novel by Morris Gleitzman. So this one I picked up because it honestly sounded hilarious. It's about essentially two boys who decide to break into Buckingham Palace to ask the Queen to cure his brother's cancer, and I thought this had the potential for being like a fun and accessible way to really explore some darker topics. And in reading it, I don't know, I just feel like things were being made almost too light. It was just not, I don't think the combination of tones worked really in the way that the author was intending to. Maybe in the original novel it really worked, but at least in the play version, I just don't know. So yeah, I did DNF this, and this is going to get donated. The next DNF I have is The One I Love by Clamp. So Clamp are a group of 4 artists. Anyway, there's a couple of manga artists who work together essentially on a bunch of stories, and they work under the name of Clamp, and they often have a lot of crossovers. They've written a lot of really big staples in the manga genre, and I'd just never seen this particular volume by them. So essentially this is a series of short stories, basically, by Clamp, all about love. And for me, I just thought it was just okay. None of the stories really did anything for me, and I found my mind wandering. I found myself being like, oh yeah, I only have X number of pages. Like, this is so short, and it's a comic, and multiple times I just put it down and I was like, I don't particularly want to pick it back up. So yeah, this one is going. The next one I have is one of the Edge Chronicles, and that is The Curse of the Gloam Glozer. And yeah, I've been collecting this particular series for ages, being like, oh, I'll get into that eventually. I know that I want to read it. And I realised that it was just a series I wanted to have read. There's some sort of more middle grade-y or lower YA series that I still really enjoy, like the Vampires series from Justin Somper. Anyway, but this just didn't really work for me. I thought that obviously if I had read this in the age that sort of it's intended to be read, I think that I would have enjoyed it far more. But at my age, the characters just felt a little bit juvenile and annoying, which is totally fair for the age group that they are. But just, I didn't want to continue, so I DNF this. So that's my DNFs, onto my 2 stars. And I only have one, which is good, and that is Can Everyone Please Calm Down by, it'll be on the screen, I can't remember, May something. They're a comedian, and though there were things I really liked about this, there was a lot more that I didn't, and I think it was just kind of okay. First of all, I think that a lot of the comedy used in this series is essentially the comedy that they use in their sort of stand-up routines, and I just think in the written form it wasn't as funny. I also think that if all the graphics and stuff were taken out of this book, you'd really only have a pamphlet. There wasn't a lot of substance in here. But my main concern, I don't know, my main criticism, I guess, would be the way it was marketed. And I know that this may not be up to the author, but the fact that it's called a 21st century guide, it's just, it presents such a one-sided argument for the things that the author thinks and their opinions, and I think that that's fine, but when you present yourself as a all-inclusive like guide to something and say this is the only book that someone picks up, I do think that it could really sway someone's opinion without giving them like all of the facts, and it just felt, oh, it just rubbed me the wrong way in that. But there were other things that I think were, you know, really good, and I enjoyed hearing about the author's experiences. There were certain things that I really relate to. I don't see myself returning to this one, unfortunately, but I'm glad I read it. And I have 1 3-star, and that is Nempantla. Essentially, this is a collection of poetry by queer authors of colour, and essentially I landed on a 3-star because this is my problem with a lot of poetry. A lot of it goes way over my head, a lot of it's very metaphorical, you have to read a lot into it, and I, you know, wasn't so impacted by those sorts of ones, but there were still a lot of poetry in this collection that really impacted me and I really enjoyed. So because it is an anthology of poetry, it's not got sort of a very unified theme, although there are themes especially of, say, discrimination running throughout. So I would recommend if poetry is your thing, but not my favourite collection of all time. So now on to some 3.5 stars. So another anthology, but this time of prose, is Love and Other Thought Experiments. Now, this one is not the sort of anthology that you can kind of pick and choose which stories you want to read. It's very much a case of, it's an anthology by one author and you're supposed to read all the stories in order to get the full picture. And because of that, there are certain stories that really don't work on their own, and there were some that I really, really enjoyed. There were some that I thought were just okay. There were some that I felt like they were filler. The way that this anthology is set up is that the author introduces a thought experiment. I was disappointed not to see the classic ones by Einstein, but oh well. And then has a short story inspired by that thought experiment. Some of them I didn't quite see the connection and kind of felt like she had the story in her mind and then connected it to a thought experiment so it fit the collection. And then there were some that I just thought were too obvious. I don't know if I'm just being pedantic at this point, but like there was a story about, there was a thought experiment about empathy and sort of being in other people's shoes, and then the story was about someone who was a judgmental bitch. So I thought that was a bit like on the nose and obvious, but it worked in the collection. But overall, there wasn't enough stories that I really enjoyed to really hike up that rating, so I just landed on a 3.5. My next 3.5 is The Darkest Pleasure by Gina Showalter, part of the Lords of the Underworld series. Now, I don't read the smutty genre very much, but when I do, it tends to be from this series because I really enjoy the fantasy element and I really enjoy the running plot line of these two sides. You have a group of people, well, a group of fantasy creatures, essentially, who were originally warriors of the Greek gods. They angered the Greek gods and released the demons from Pandora's box, and then each warrior was essentially used as a container for one of the demons from Pandora's box, and you follow them in war with the hunters, who are groups of humans who are trying to take them down. And you have essentially one book is a romance story between one of the warriors with sometimes another warrior or sometimes a human. So I really enjoy the fantasy element, and I was just in the mood. So far, this has been my least favourite of the series. This one follows the Keeper of Pain and Danica. So yeah, not much to say on this one. It was a really enjoyable read, and I will continue on with the series, just not my favourite. The next book I have is A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Littlebadger, I believe. So this one, again, I gave a 3.5, but honestly, I still really recommend it. I really hope that publishing starts to invest in more Indigenous authors. I think it's really good that they were able to get this book published, and I really enjoyed the writing style. My issue was that, not that the blurb gave too much away, but the book took too long to get to the point that the blurb sort of promised. And I think that it was really unclear with these two parallel storylines. I was like, is one happening in the future and one in the past? Like, the timing of everything wasn't really working for me. So I wish it had been sort of marketed a little bit differently. Again, that's not the author's fault. This book essentially follows a boy who is a snake, essentially, and he falls to the human realm, and the girl who finds him and them trying to save her grandma's property, save her grandma. And it was a really, really interesting story. I loved the Indigenous culture that was woven throughout, and quite obviously it had quite a strong message about the importance of land and land being taken away from Indigenous people. And I just think that it was a really good story, but not the perfect one for me. I'm really interested to read Lattes, which is this author's previous novel to this, but I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend. So on to my 4 stars, and this one is going to seem a little stupid because of course it is, and it is The Sentient Physical Manifestation of Halloween Eats Me Out. So this is another Chuck Tingle book. If you don't know, Chuck Tingle is a well-known supporter of the LGBT community, a huge activist, and writes a lot of these short, ridiculous, what he calls tinglers, which feature really diverse, often very queer relationships. And he's just an all-round very great guy, and his books are just so funny. Like, he could have, with these sorts of titles and covers, he could have been writing absolute bull and still probably got them read and got them out there. But from what I've read of his work, and I'm sure that I'll read more when I feel like it, but from what I know of his work, he really puts a lot of effort into it. Like, one that I really want to read is called Moby Butt, which is a lesbian retelling of Moby Dick. And I'm pretty sure he had to have read all of Moby Dick to actually put this really short story together. I mean, he could have just gone with what everyone kind of knows about the story to put it together, but I'm pretty sure he actually read the whole thing. So it's just, anyway. Maybe I should read Moby Dick and that one in a vlog. Let me know if you'd want that. But this one was essentially, as the title suggests, this woman who loves Halloween, is in love with Halloween, and she meets Halloween herself, and they have a connection, and it was a lot of fun. It was just ridiculous, but it was really, really fun. So, do I recommend this one? Sure. If this is what you're into, have at it. So on to my favourites of the month. I gave this one 4.5 stars, but looking back on it, I can't think of why I wouldn't have given it a 5. and that is Welcome to Night Vale by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner. So this is based on the podcast of the same name, and this is a sort of book where I don't think it stands alone. I do think that this is for fans of the podcast, and I think that some context from the podcast is probably needed before you read this. This one worked really well for me because I am already a fan of the podcast. So essentially, Night Vale is this place where the paranormal is normal, and the podcast itself follows Cecil, who is essentially a radio host, and he, in his soft, sultry voice, tells listeners about things in the town, and a lot of the absolutely horrifying is completely normal. And this one, so it essentially follows the lives of two women and how their stories interconnect. This book and the podcast series in general tends to say one thing and comment on one thing but mean something else, and I really love the way that it does that. I know that I'm not making a lot of sense, but like, there was a conversation I really liked in here about how one of the women, her parents were not married, and there was a lot of sort of judgment in the town, and the sorts of things that they would say to her, and it was sort of presented in this very fantastical way, but the commentary was on people's judgment of the way other people choose to live their lives, and I really, really loved that. And I know that they've now come up with a number of other novels, so I will be continuing on in the series, and I really love this. Oh, also, there's been a number of books I've talked about that I didn't mention that they were queer. So Cecil in here, I don't know if he ever defined his sexuality, but he's in a relationship with another man, and that's explored in here, and their relationship is really, really cute. Let's have a look. So Can Everyone Please Calm Down was a discussion on a lot of different sexualities. Obviously, Nempantla was by queer authors and had a lot of queer themes. Love and Other Thought Experiments was also queer. There was a lesbian couple that you followed throughout the series, and there were quite a number of other queer people in that. A Snake Falls to Earth. The main girl is Ace, and a couple of the other characters are Ace as well, I think. The sentient physical manifestation of Halloween, etc. That was about a bisexual girl. And yeah, that's it. So sorry for not going through that. And essentially this month I was having quite a bad mental health time, and I just decided to reread a bunch of my favourites. Especially with comics, I just felt like I needed something easy to digest and just something really comforting. So let's see. So I ended up rereading some books from these two series, which I consider to be my two favourite comic series of all time. So first of all, we have Samurai Deepakyo, and I read volumes 1 to 9 of this series. Essentially, it follows Yuya, who is a bounty hunter. I love her strong-willed nature, and just, she doesn't take anyone's shit. And she meets someone on her travels who she believes has this huge bounty, and they kind of become friends, kind of like she's still wanting to turn him in, but he has another person or soul trapped in his body, and it's about the three of them and the people that they meet along the way through their journeys. And I just love this series so much because of the relationships and the dynamic sort of ways that all these characters interact and come to really care for each other, and I just really, really love that. And yeah, I will be continuing on with this. I can't remember, but there's like 35 volumes in this, but yeah, I will finish this out again because I love this series a lot. And the other one, From Far Away, volumes 1 to 14, so that's the entire series. So this one, it's an older series, and the art style reflects that. It's got this older art style, and I just love this series so very much. I think this one was my like 4th read through of the series, but it essentially follows a schoolgirl called Noriko, and she basically gets blown up by a planted bomb in Tokyo, and her body is never found. Her family don't know what happened to her really, and essentially she gets blown to this other world and meets all these fantastical creatures, and she essentially has to survive. She doesn't speak the language, and she meets Isaac, who seems to be this sort of superhuman person who saves her, and it's about them as they become friends, and she finds a place for herself in this world, and it's just such a wonderful story. I love all the relationships in here. There is actually in both of these comic series, at one point there is a trans character, and I love that they are treated with such respect, and they are both such strong, independent women, and I really love how that was represented. And that's not till later in the series, and it's not a main character in either of those, but I really love how both of that's represented. So yay to this. And the last 5-star that I have is another reread, and that is Immaculate by Oliver Lansley. So essentially I set up a group reading with some people from my drama group to read through this because 1, it's a favourite, and 2, I'd like to put it on in some sort of way. And essentially this follows a woman who is pregnant, can't work out how or why because she hasn't had sex in over 9 months. She broke up with her boyfriend ages ago, and she essentially gets visited by more and more people over the course of this day, claiming to either be the father or know the father, 2 of whom are God and Lucifer, and just hilarity ensues. I really enjoyed the religious commentary on this and how religion can work in the modern day, and I just like, it's hilarious. It really challenges beliefs while not being necessarily degrading or, oh, you're stupid to believe in blah blah blah. No, like, it really doesn't make fun of religion, but really questions certain things about it, and I just really enjoyed the reading experience, given the fact that I've read this about 3 times this year alone. But like, I love this. I love this so much. And basically there you have it. Those are a bunch of the books that I read in August, and I'm now immediately going to get into filming my September one because I am quite late with all this filming. So I shall see you in my next video. Please tell me down below in the comments about a book that you read recently, and I will see you soon. Bye.